And we're live. Hey, everybody. Great to have you here. Welcome to the MoJOE Studio Podcast. I am MoJOE, Joe McCarthy, here again with my good friends Rick Olson, Jon Weirauch, and a new friend to me, although we do have some shared history, SCOTT HAGAN, president of North Central Bible College. I'm going to pass this over to Rick, and Rick, take us where you want to go.
Thank you, Joe. We're very excited to share this time with you. Absolutely thrilled that Scott is with us today for the podcast. Scott and I have a lot of history. We go back to the 80s, very special time in our lives as we were both very much focused on youth and impacting youth in such a positive way. And we haven't had a lot of connections over these years, but the last few years have kind of brought us closer. It's been very special. And within 2 weeks, I'm going to be sitting beside Scott at a Minnesota Twins game and looking forward to it. Minnesota Twins have been kind of El Stinko to start the season, but they've won 4 in a row, and we're hoping for some momentum going into that game. I am thrilled because Scott has come back to the university where I went as a student, and I taught as a professor later, and now he is the president of North Central University in Minneapolis. And I couldn't think of a finer person in America to lead that university than Scott Hagan. I'm absolutely thrilled that he's in that role. And so, Scott, on behalf of Joe and Jon and myself, we want to welcome you to our podcast tonight. Thanks for joining us.
No, thanks a bunch. And it's great when I come across people from that era. I tell the students all the time, I'm from the 1900s. That's just kind of how I frame it now. Back in the 1900s. But Joe, you called it North Central Bible College, and I rarely hear it called that except by somebody from that era because it came a university in the 90s. And but it's still at its heart, it's a Bible college. It kept the DNA, though it's more of a sophisticated, comprehensive university now. But it's great to be on here. And ever since Rick and I committed to the Twins, they've won 4 in a row. We committed to going to the game. So I just think
that's right.
We brought something positive just by getting the tickets. You bought the tickets, so I'm appreciative of that. But hey, they're on a winning streak.
All right. Well, may it lead to a great summer, and maybe I'll sit beside you, Scott, in the fall at the World Series game there in Minneapolis. Jon, it's always a joy to have you, and we've heard the other voices. Want to hear your voice tonight. Give greetings to the folks, and you can tell us about the huge event that happened in your baby daughter's life today. I think we'd all like to hear that.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. And I just want to say it's an honor. I've also never met Scott Hagan. I don't have the history, but I have seen some of the quotes. I've got an excellent book out there, and I'm very excited to be here with you. So I'm here in Frankenmuth, Michigan. I am putting my daughter down. I mean, this is 20 minutes ago, honestly, maybe about a half hour, putting my daughter down to sleep. And I'm laying down in the nursery. She's 10 months old. She's got one hand on one knee, the other hand on my other knee. She looks at me, puts both hands up in the air, and just kind of stares, kind of, look, Daddy, look what I did. Puts her hands down. She could have stood there for 20 minutes. This is the first time I've seen her stand on her own. I am smiles for miles here.
Awesome.
It's a big night. It's a momentous night. Your daughter stands, you meet Scott Hagan. That's a good night, sir.
Absolutely.
Well, little Claire is 10 months old. She's a beautiful little girl. Her mama is one of the finest athletes to ever come through Frankenmuth. So this little gal is going to be standing and running and jumping for a long time.
Absolutely.
All right. So Scott, let's begin to talk about leadership and other things. Leadership is really a major thrust of what we talk about in our podcasts. And I just want to start off by saying thank you for taking the time to write The Language of Influence and Personal Power. This is a fantastic book, Scott. And I'm recommending it everywhere. I was in Texas last week working with a large company down there. The CEO bought a bunch of copies. I know over at Jon's place, they bought copies for all the leaders over at Jon's Credit Union. I'm telling everybody I can about it. But you've always been a terrific leadership insight guy. and you took the time to write your thoughts. And so we want to thank you for doing that. That's just a great contribution. Tell us a little bit about the journey of writing the book, what that's meant to you.
Well, it really never started as a book. I have published 6 books through kind of normal channels, writing, and set out to write a book. This book, however, happened by by chance, because I tell leaders all the time about half your life is a result of strategy, and the other half of your life you never saw coming. And this is one of those things that I never saw coming. I actually self-published his book at first. I came across a book of prayers by Mother Teresa in a bookstore, because I had been writing these little one-liners for years, and then long before social media, social media kind of gave me a chance to publish these little one-liners. I'd spoken them before. And so, but I go, it's not a book, because you can't write a book with 2 or 3 sentence one-liners. So, but I saw this book of prayers by Mother Teresa that had 2 or 3 prayers, short prayers on a page. And it was mostly a blank page with short prayers. And I go, hey, thank you, Mother Teresa. I think I'll compile this into a book. And I self-published the book through CreateSpace, paid somebody $1,500 just to kind of create the design. It was an initial, just an all yellow cover book, and threw it out there on CreateSpace. And within a year, 17,000 copies had been purchased. Kind of the breakthrough was Dan Riccio, who is the senior vice president at Apple. He answers right to Tim Cook. He got a hold of the book through somebody that sent it to him, and it started showing up in the morning emails to the executives at Apple. And at that point, then Florida State University football team started using it. This person started using it. New York Yankees started using it. And so then 17,000 copies later, I got a call from a publisher in New York from Kensington Books. And he said, hey, is this your book with the yellow cover? And I said, yes. And he goes, hey, have you been sued? I said, sued? And he goes, there's no citations for these quotes that you've collected. And there was kind of that awkward moment where I said, well, I wrote them. And he said, you wrote 500 quotes? I said, no, I wrote 1,500. I just put 500, 1,000 more sitting here for. And he says, you own the content? I said, no, sir, I own the content. I've been doing this for years. It's just how I speak. It's how I think. And I just have been collecting them. Social media kind of gave me a way to catalog it. And this book thing happened. He said, I don't self-published books. He said, but I do all of Brian Tracy's stuff and Tony Robbins and all this stuff. He said, this is the best fingertip leadership advice I've ever seen, just fingertip stuff. He goes, that you could use a minute after reading it. So Kensington out of New York redid the book, and they changed the title from The Language of Influence to The Language of Influence and Personal Power. And I didn't like the title. It was too gimmicky for me at first. And he said, no, he goes, this book has changed my way I think about power. You have flipped power upside down. You redefined it. So when he kind of convinced me that it was an okay title to change it. And so it was re-released about just under 2 years ago. And yeah, it's been going gangbusters. I think another 40,000 copies have been sold, and it's just getting started. A lot of the Green Bay Packers use it all this year. I'm trying to get the Vikings to use it, but it's a lot of sports teams, a lot of organizations. This one company out of Indiana just bought 1,200. They're using it as their onboarding tool for every new employee. Then they have 1,000 employees across the country, and that they've given the book to, and they're doing a project through the year for their company. So I think it's just getting started. The guy who helped me publish it, he thinks there's 5 million people out there that are going to get their hands on this book ultimately. So it's just kind of getting started.
That's fantastic. And I believe that. I think you are on your way to 5 million. Every time I give it to somebody, show it to somebody, they're taking a picture of it on their smartphone, they're ordering it. And so it's what a gift to all of us who aspire to be effective leaders. It's just, it's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's interesting. When I first compiled it, I gave it to a millennial to kind of pre-read it and look at it. And they came back and said, maybe you should organize this into 12 categories and like have 12 different subject matters. So I spent about 2 weeks trying to organize it into 12 categories, and I hated it. In my gut, what I wanted was for every page to be a discovery, that I didn't want it highly organized. And so I said, no, I'm going to go with my gut instinct on this. But I think it should just be this big, huge collection of random thoughts that are not organized, that just fall out like fortune cookies. And they're not fortune cookies, but and I'm glad I did it that way. Most people say I just keep flipping page after page and I don't know what's coming next. And that's been kind of the magic secret sauce of the book.
Good. Well, way to resist the urge to categorize.
Right. Well, not only is this a gift to leaders, which it absolutely is, it's a gift to authors, because I'm a budding author and I've never heard of a fingertip book, right? And so the idea that I don't have to have 500 words on a page to make a book that's worthwhile, that's going to have an impact, that's freeing. That's a gift to authors. Thank you for that.
Joe's deep into his first book writing project. I do a virtual school called the Speakers School, and we take aspiring speakers. We go through a 5-week evening class virtually. Joe and Jon were both part of that last year. Something got lit inside of Joe McCarthy. He started writing, and he's well on the way to completion of his first book. But it is going to be terrific, and it fits really well. So I know this has been very meaningful to him to hear your journey in this process. It's good.
So what's interesting, I was just reading one of your quotes, Scott, a great communicator can explain familiar things in new ways. And that's kind of the approach of your book, right? It's all a whole new approach that we haven't seen before. That's just that's excellent. That's what the world is hungry for. Is just, a lot of these concepts have been around hundreds, thousands of years. The leadership concepts and emotional intelligence and all that stuff, and we just have to present it in new and exciting ways. So that's really cool.
I just, in the midst of doing this, I just finished my dissertation with my PhD. I finished at Gonzaga. So you these polar opposite things happening. Most ideas in the world come our way, and they need fewer words. You try to simplify it with fewer words. Sometimes there's an idea that needs more words for people to understand it, but most ideas need less words. And it's turning complex things into simple ways to grab hold of it. But you are correct. We're living in a world that I really battled with the book too, of it being cheap and kind of feeding the beast of shallow, too simplistic, that whole social media Twitter world. I really battled that I was participating in that shallowness of leadership. And I think my wife helped me see. She goes, no, this stuff isn't shallow. It's simple, but you took complex things and made them easy for people to understand and put leadership on the bottom shelf. Doesn't mean it's cheap, because any successful leadership is going to be incredibly costly and sacrificial. So accessibility doesn't mean cheap. And so you made understanding on the bottom shelf for people. So I had all those mental roadblocks getting this thing kind of put out there and being insecure about it at first, but it's been encouraging to see the impact.
Well, the publisher for the Tony Robbins group said you've taken these concepts of leadership and turned it on its head. And I might say, push back on that and say, well, probably you've turned it right side up, right? It was upside down already. You've actually taken the leadership idea and put it right side up. But explain in your own words, what do you think he meant by that? And how do you see that applying through your words, through your book?
I think, the book was published in the midst of this last couple of years where we've had, and especially 2020, the Bermuda Triangle with COVID, the racial unrest, the election. It created all of this polarization. Instead of people being galvanized, they were polarized and separated. And I think people's definition of power has been all over the map. They don't know how to define it in the sense of really authority through humility and through service. And so I think his name is Steve Zacharias. He's the person that owns Kensington. he just felt that when he read it, it just helped him understand power and kind of cleared his head again about humility and servanthood. And, you know, I write from obviously a Christ-centered perspective. But when I wrote this book, I initially put it together for the people right before I came to North Central, for the people in our church, because I wanted to give them something that they could take to work and give to the most evil person they know. I asked the church, how many of you work for the Antichrist? You know, I said, you don't work for the Antichrist, because I actually did work for the Antichrist. We owned a restaurant in Santa Cruz, and I was a Bible college student at Bethany, and he owned a little restaurant, and I was a busboy. He is the Antichrist. I've been waiting for him to be revealed to the earth. I know it's going to happen, because he was the most soulless, callous, coldest human I'd ever met in my life. But in all seriousness, I realize a lot of people go to work, they're the only Christian in the room, and that's becoming more and more prevalent. But this particular resource, I go, what can we do that would bring value into the marketplace, into the workplace, that you could give to somebody as a believer that would help them, even though they may have zero context of faith in their life? And so it's interesting. I know this made it all the way to Pelosi's desk, Trump's desk. It's made it to everybody's desk. And it's interesting, even in the political realm, I have the most liberal, the most conservative will send me a text and say, hey man, I keep this on my desk. I thumb through it before I go into meetings, and it just stimulates my mind real quick. And I typically use something from it. So it really has resonated at a level. And I think leadership is, I see leadership as healing. And kind of missional leadership. What I mean by that is being able to give away principles that, even though people may not be living them, they can understand them and they can aspire to them if they can quickly understand them, or give them that contrast real quick of something that is true and wise and tested. And it's not my words. You know, you guys are believers. You've read through it. You know where this stuff's coming from. Sure. But just kind of contextualized to the language. But it was really designed to give to people who are way outside the church.
Yeah, I love that.
Excellent.
Yeah, I don't know, just amazing. Maybe because I'm looking for it now, but I see this thread of servant leadership bubbling up in so many different places that I wouldn't necessarily expect. So you've mentioned Tony Robbins, Dean Graziosi, John Maxwell. Of course, that doesn't surprise me, but even Simon Sinek, who's a big, guru and all this kind of stuff. Brene Brown. If you boil down what they're saying, really they're saying that leadership should be servant leadership, which is what Jesus taught us, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and Robert Greenlee, the famous story of Greenlee, he worked for AT&T his whole life, never wrote a book until he was 66. He was the HR director at AT&T in different areas, and he retired in the late 70s. And someone encouraged him to compile his notes from his years at AT&T, and he wrote the first book, Servant Leadership, by Robert Greenlee.
Wow.
And he sold 20 million copies of books, and he never wrote a book until he was 66. And so my PhD program at Gonzaga is obviously, it's a Jesuit university. It's deeply rooted in servant leadership principles out of the Jesuit tradition. But Dr. Larry Spears was his living protege, lived with Robert Greenlee the last 10 years of his life, compiled a bunch of notes and did a lot of the writings. And Spears then took over the Greenleaf School of Leadership. I think it's in Boston or DC. And then the Spears Leadership School of Leadership out of Chicago. And this is, Kellogg, everyone uses the Greenleaf and Spears. Well, Larry was one of my instructors. He's one of my good friends. My program at Gonzaga was not online. I had to travel there twice a month for 5 years. It was a classroom experience. And just some of the world-renowned thinkers, writers on leadership. But you're right, servant leadership, that doesn't mean soft leadership. It is absolutely courageous, ferocious leadership to live in this day and age with humility and a sense of otherness. And so you're right, it's everywhere because it's effective. And people are longing for something that is true.
Yeah. Let me pick up on the on the idea of simple communication. I spend my life as a communicator traveling around America and talk about how that effective communicators do simplify things. In my lifetime, three of my favorite communicators would be John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and Billy Graham. Yeah. And outstanding communicators, all of them took complex issues, made them very simple. So Martin Luther King wanted to speak about civil rights. What a vast theme to go after. And how did he do it? His communication sounded like this: I've been to the mountaintop and I have a dream. And we all remember that speech. It's one of the great speeches in American history, but everybody understood it. John F. Kennedy wanted to move America out into volunteerism. How did he do it? In his inaugural address in 1961, that famous statement, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Billy Graham, having spoke to more people in person than any person who's ever lived on the planet, took great concepts of eternal life, and brought those concepts down so that every child would understand it, every church or non-church person would understand it. And it's been the genius of communicators through the years to take the complex and make it simple. So I gravitate to all those things which do that. I want everybody to understand. And when I speak, my goal is I want a sixth grader to be able to sit through my entire presentation and not be lost, but understand everything that's being said, everything that's being communicated.
You know, I've got to piggyback on that, Rick. I have an observation and a question, Scott. I think it's interesting that you spoke to a millennial, and I'm one of those, and they, kind of opposite of what Rick was just saying, they seemed like they wanted to almost make it more complex, you know, categorize it and do this and do that, and you kept it simple and you stuck with your gut. My question is, how has this resonated with millennials? Has the younger generation, have you gotten a lot of feedback, a big audience there, or has it not so much? For me, I eat this stuff up. So I love it and I read it and I enjoy it. But what have you experienced?
No, it's been, and maybe that was just the one millennial that read it that maybe was a type A organized person. I don't know. It's been huge with high school kids, junior high kids, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, football teams, teenagers have loved this book. Great feedback. Rick, you know, you still are a great communicator. You had a big impact on my life in the 80s. And if we didn't have COVID last year, we would have got you last year, but 2021, get ready. You're going to come speak at your alma mater. You're coming back. And it'll be a great day.
Thank you.
A big day. So when we go to the Twins game, bring your calendar, Rick.
All right. All right.
So, but you've tapped into really the crux of effective communication. I tell people, you don't want to be an interesting communicator. You want to be a fascinating communicator. An interesting communicator keeps people's attention. A fascinating communicator actually, they lose their attention span because you've said something that has set their mind on fire and they're thinking about their own possibilities. When people lose track of what I'm saying because I've said something that have set their minds on fire, I realize that I'm fascinating. I'm not just interesting. And typically, narrative storytelling, the simplicity of narrative, is the key to everything. It's what Jesus was the greatest at. Right. And it's our ability to capture what I call epiphanies. People say, where do you get these little sayings? I go, I don't know. I get them all the time. I get them in my dream. I'm walking down the street. I'm much better. I always have something. I'll just whisper something. I'll write something real fast, a little one-liner, because it has to do with a noticing. There's a great scholar, his name is Schotter, that talks about the 7 types of noticing. And the 7th, or the highest level of noticing, it's called a disquiet. It's where you just feel this thing inside you that causes you to be aware that something is near you, around you. You're noticing something of this little disquiet. I've really disciplined myself to pay attention to that, and then to try and capture a couple words, a couple syllables that connect to that disquiet. If you notice, a lot of my writings, they're contrasts. This is contrast to this, the difference between this, and and it's a simple way of helping people see difference through contrast. But you got to capture epiphanies, and an epiphany is this little awareness of something in your life. And if you can cultivate that, you'll be shocked at how much you can start grabbing from the world around you, and keep it again simple. You think of Jesus again, ultimately, the Bible says in John 21:25, I think it's the last verse of John. It says that the world is not big enough to hold the books if everything about Jesus was written. It doesn't say there's not enough books in the world. It says there's not enough world to hold the books. Yeah. But then Jesus simplified and said, I'm light, door, bread, water. And we just have to remember this. Like, why is that so meaningful? And then as storytellers, as communicators, follow that example in how we share and storytell.
One of the things you said earlier that I really picked up on, and I'd love to repeat, is that what your book does, it may give people a new thought, but it may just remind them of a thought that they had agreed with at some point in their past and just forgot about it and didn't have it available to them when they needed it. So by having this fingertip book with truths that are inspiring and that can send people into a place that they can apply it to their own life and to their own group, their own organization, but they can just flip through it and nail it and be reminded, oh, that's how I really feel. That's how I want to lead. That's the inspiration that I want to give, and then be able to take that into everyday life. That's such a gift, such a tool, as opposed to, a volume of things where you'd have to, okay, what chapter and what page and what paragraph, and forget it. I just don't have time for that. But they could just page 4. Okay, I'm ready to go. I just love that. It's a way to equip the people to go and lead in a way that they want to lead anyway. They just forgot what it was they were doing.
Yeah, and I think you're so correct. I think the best compliment is when people say, that's exactly how I have felt, but I've never had a way to say it. Yeah. And you gave them a very simple little path to say what they felt. You unlocked the feeling and put it into the known language. And the other thing about simple stories or simple epiphanies like this, they help people reacquaint themselves to themselves. I became reacquainted with something that I once knew. And whenever you can lead people back to their hometown, to their place of nostalgia, to some place of discovery, the best thing about being human beings is that the things we once knew and once practiced, we can know and rediscover those things and practice them again. I don't think cats can do that, but we made in God's image could do that. And so I think great communicators help reacquaint people to themselves and rekindle the things that they either neglected or forgotten or felt like they just didn't have the willpower to pursue it anymore. So
excellent. So Scott, I want to pivot a little bit. As I've mentioned to you, I just could not be more pleased that you've come to North Central, that you're at the helm, and I love the direction that you're leading the college in. You came in a very interesting time. You're leading in a COVID world, and you're leading in a world of great social unrest. And you happen to be right in the crosshairs of the social unrest. You're a matter of blocks away from where George Floyd's life ended. The riots that broke out in Minneapolis did impact all of South Minneapolis, including your university. I want to talk a little bit about what that was like, leading in that time, living in that time. I'm so pleased at how God used your life when things were at kind of the hottest in Minneapolis. I believe that you were uniquely used to help bring the temperature down in the city. So all of America is locked in, intrigued, saddened by what's happened, but it goes back to 38th in Chicago. And would love to have you maybe recount what that was like to live where you live, to run the university where you run the university, in close proximity. What was that journey like?
Thank you for asking, Rick. And obviously, this is the week. He died on Memorial Day, which calendar-wise was this last Monday, I believe. And so we would have been a year ago right now in the throes of the riots. The riots would have been, as I say that outside my window, I hear sirens here in Minneapolis. So we do those sound effects for people a lot. Obviously, it happened like three-dimensional high-speed chess. You're playing, you're operating off gut instinct. Hopefully, the treasury of what is stored inside you as a leader, as a person, as a neighbor, is activated. So he died on Monday. By Wednesday, Thursday, the city was burning. We had vandalism at the university. I did think the school was going to catch on fire and possibly burn. And so on that Friday night, he died Monday, Friday of that week, got a phone call from the family, from a member of my staff who knew the family, and said the family was wondering if next Thursday they could have a place to grieve and have a small family gathering before the big funeral in Houston the following week, in which the body will be there. Well, the city shut down with COVID, city's on fire. And I really felt in that moment three things. One is the phrase table of healing. And I really felt the Lord put that in my heart to create a table of healing. Just do that and allow me to use a table of healing. Secondly was a famous little story in scripture that talks about Elisha finding out that the man had died, and the man who died was one of his prophets, and the sons were being sold to pay his debt. And Elisha says a very simple sentence that has framed my leadership life. In 2 Kings chapter 4, I think it's verse 2, it says, Elisha says, how can I help? He doesn't say, how can I prophesy? How can I lead? How can I help? So I really felt that. And then I had that quick image of scripture where Paul comes back from his third missionary journey. The city's burning. It's a riot. It wasn't burning, but there was a riot. And the apostle said, can you shave your head, go in the temple and pay the vows and help the people know you don't hate Moses, to calm the riot? So all of that just instantly flooded my heart. I called our board chair. We knew there'd be political theater, but we just decided it's where we needed to be. I've always felt our role as a neighbor is to alleviate suffering. And if that's all we can do is help alleviate suffering, we have served our neighbor well. We have served the Lord well. And so that was really, it wasn't complicated. It wasn't a strategy. It was just that. Well, then over the next 48 hours, it turned into a global event. There was 500 media requests, which is more than the Super Bowl has. We allowed 300 media requests. We had to hire a firm to help us with that. NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt is set up right on the boulevard. The Today Show, the whole studio, the BBC, 300 news outlets are here. And we realized by that morning, President Obama was coming. Vice President Pence was supposed to come and speak. So both Pence and Obama were supposed to speak that day, which would have probably leveled out the political feel of the event. And then we found out that the body would be there as well. But I think the big thing for me is the night before, we're at the Residence Inn down here in Minneapolis. The Mayor Fry's opened up the hotel for the family and for the media. And I'm down there with Reverend Sharpton and the different ones. There's about 5 of us sitting around the table. And right behind them on the wall is a television. And there's a scene from Paris. And there's 1 million people marching down the Champs-Élysées in Paris for George Floyd. And then the split screen, there's 800,000 people in Buckingham Palace standing there in a vigil for George Floyd. How did this life and this event light the entire planet on fire with awareness and angst? And so the thought that individual was in a casket down here on 910 Elliott, Rick, was unfathomable to me. Like, how did all this happen? Yeah. And so the funeral happened. They asked me to pray the night before. I declined. I said, no, we've got some great African-American leaders. Let them pray. And they said, no, we really want you to pray. And then the night before, our chancellor, Robin Wilkerson, said, we should do a scholarship of something. And I thought, what a wonderful thing to do, to turn and anguish into action. And so, but I was worried that people thought we were making money off George Floyd's passing. So that night alone in this apartment, sitting on this couch, I was kind of rehearsing the prayer in my heart. And at that point, I knew that we were headed toward something very large. Ended up being 100 million people watched worldwide, 2 billion social media engagements, most in human history since analytics were created in the 2008 or 9. Since those records were kept, more than the Trump election, more than the World Cup. There were 2 billion engagements, social media in the first 60 minutes, people around the world checking in on the Floyd situation. So all that's about to unfold. And I was on this couch and I just really felt challenge all the presidents in the country to do the same thing, so people could give to the college of their choice. That way people wouldn't think that North Central was trying to make money. So I made that challenge. I led that prayer, and it trended #1 in the world for 11 minutes. College president challenges all universities to the Floyd Scholarship. There's been over 55 universities, Yale, Penn State, Michigan, University of Minnesota. I can go on and on. And the president of Penn State, in the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper, said, we're going to take up the North Central President Hagan challenge. I mean, when's the last time Penn State and North Central were in the same sentence? The day after the funeral, every major newspaper in the world was headlined with the Floyd funeral. There's a picture of our chapel, sanctuary, North Central University, and then the President Hagan challenge. They said we had the equivalent of if we'd bought 30 Super Bowl commercials. We were in 57,000 media mentions the next day, and he said there's no way to calculate what this has meant. I will tell you this: right when it was done, I stepped off the stage, and the media person said, "Hey, Lester Holt wants you on tonight. Hannity wants you on. Martha McCallum, Joy Reid wants you on. The Today Show wants you in the studio in the morning. D.L. Hughley wants you on his show." And I just really felt the Lord say, "Don't do those. Don't do those shows. Don't do it. This is a trap. It's not don't be a face of anything right now. This is about a pastoral moment. It's not about politics." And that was probably the wisest professional move of my life. Now, I'm 58. If I was 48, I probably would have leaned in and said, "Hey, wow, look at this opportunity." But at 58, I just had a different perspective. And since then, doors have opened up. We're in a collaborative coming up here with Harvard University on some ideas that there's no way on this planet that these could, staying in the pastor educator lane, not the politician lane, was a wise move. But over $500,000 has been given to North Central. We have a phenomenal kid this year, full ride tuition scholarship. We'll be able to give one a year. One quick story: I had the owner and founder of Cardinal Glass, Roger Shaughnessy, called me up. Never met him. He said, "Hey, I'm in my 70s. I'm in Eden Prairie. I never even knew this school existed. I've been here my whole life." He goes, "I didn't go to college or finish college. Floyd didn't finish college, but I want to give a gift of $100,000 to your school." And he since has given 2 of those gifts. And we developed a phenomenal friendship. And his company, has 7,800 employees, 19 locations, $2 billion in revenue. So there's been some enormous, wonderful new friendships that have formed toward NCU around the country because of this moment of turning anguish into action.
John, Joe, quite a story, isn't it?
Oh, my word. Yeah. Well, first of all, as an alumni, John, you can go first if you want.
No, you go right ahead. You're the alumni.
First, as an alumni of NCBC, I couldn't be prouder, of course, just like Rick said. And to know, when I was there, most of the people in the neighborhoods didn't know who we were or what we were doing. And that was okay. We weren't there to be known. But for God to handpick you at this moment in time in history, knowing full well that when the opportunity came for you to make it about you, right, to go on all these shows and make it a media thing, God knew your heart. He knew what the choice that you would make. And so I can only deduce that he said, yes, it's you, it's now, for such a time as this, right? And what a beautiful example you've set for leaders around the world.
Yeah, and I think the most impressive thing that I'm from that whole story was how many things could have gone wrong for you and for your university had you made the wrong decision. And so the fact that, again, I agree with Joe. I believe God handpicked you. He knew you were going to keep a calm, cool head. I'm curious, what's your secret? What's your tactic? How did you, just to keep that calm and cool and know that you have to make these right decisions, because it is no small decisions being made here. Just how was that experience?
Yeah, and thank you for asking. I have had the opportunity to share at some educator levels with some university presidents from around the country. There's kind of a unique irony in this. When I first became the president of North Central, I had just come out of general counsel, and Rick knows what these are like. And I've been in this movement for 38 years. We were in Orlando. I can't go 5 steps without talking to a friend, because you've just been in it for 38 years. So, hey, Scott, hey, Bob, there's just friends everywhere. So 2 months later, I'm the president here, and I go to the CICU conference down in Florida, which is a few thousand presidents of colleges and another 1,000 vendors. It's the big convention. I spent 3 days there. Not a human being said hello to me. I didn't recognize a single human being, nor was I recognized by a single human. I could have been a vendor selling, retention software. It was one of the most fascinating experiences to go to be 55 years old and to be completely invisible. And that was also discouraging, like, oh my goodness, it's going to take me 5 years to learn how to be an effective leader in this space. And then that's just here. I'll have no ability to shape the world around me. I'm too old, and I blew it. So I had a little bit of sadness about my life at that moment, just the obscurity. It caught me off guard. So that was 2 years ago. The Floyd thing happens. So last year, about around August, I get a phone call from the president of the CICU out of DC, and we're part of the organization. And this is not Christians. This is all private universities in the country. And he said, hey, I wanted to call and tell you how proud I was of you representing private universities. Your leadership of the Floyd thing was, and this guy named Hal was calling me, and he says, Scott, would you honor us by speaking this year at the event? So last January, I spoke to all these presidents in a setting that 2 years ago I was kind of discouraged and lost and disorientated in it. No status, no anything. And that's good for us in life. I'm a believer that obscurity is a good thing in leadership. It's part of it makes us healthy. But to then 2 years later be speaking at that event and to be propelled into that educator space of crisis management and to kind of break down thought processes. So, when the call first came, I was sitting over here on this other little couch, and it was Friday night, and I'll say this very fast, is I did have my phone in my hand. And they said, do we want to host the Floyd family next Thursday? And I'm by myself, and I go, I'm going to type YES or NO. What's on the other end of my thumb here? And there is that reality in leadership that we do in those moments in history become a gatekeeper in a way that, because I can say yes or I can just say no. Hey, we have COVID. I'm going to pass on it. But my pastoral instincts of helping, and it's still emotional, of being able to help people overrode that NO. And so you type YES and you don't really know what's on the other side of this. And that's probably a good thing. But in that moment, then after I said yes, but let me check, I made sure my radius of ownership, my board chairman, a college president, I'm not the chairman of the board. I work for the Board of Regents. It's not like a church. So in many ways, you are the employee in the cafeteria like everybody else, even though you're the president, and through shared governance. And so I had to make certain that the board chairman, and then we had a quick executive committee meeting. I called my denominational leaders, and we all felt like this is where Jesus wanted us to be, regardless that like, what are we supposed to do? Turn the family away? You can't do that. That would have haunted me for the rest of my leadership life. Let's say it was at another place and we didn't even know it still would have, at my gut, I would have felt cowardly had we said, well, what are all the AG people in the South going to think? And, and trust me, we got lit up for a week. I mean, thousands of people hated our guts, for doing it. They saw it through a political lens, not a pastoral lens. But history is serving us well. Now people all over the country, when I see them, even the most staunch conservative people have realized you were being a good neighbor and you did a good thing to help calm the city down. And I love what Rick said, lower the temperature, because that's exactly what happened. So
you just that the answer is you thought as a pastor and not politically. That is I think the entire country could use a little bit of that thought process. That's awesome. Thank you.
I love the city of Minneapolis. I've spent a lot of my life in that city. When I was in 5th grade, we lived on 28th in Chicago. So that was 10 blocks from where George Floyd was killed. As a college student, I worked Lake in Chicago, which was just 8 blocks from where George Floyd was killed. This place means a lot to me. And one of the saddest things in my life is to watch the city go up in flames. Businesses burned, 1,500 businesses burned and destroyed in Minneapolis. But I believe Scott did come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And I do believe this whole event that he has talked about was very instrumental at, again, lowering the temperature in Minneapolis. Things were out of control in the city. And it was interesting. At the time of this memorial service, it's like the whole city began to calm down. The whole city began to breathe again. And it began to return to something that felt a little more normal. Still a lot of scars and a lot of pain. But I do believe that those decisions that you made in conjunction with the board and some trusted advisors, I believe that had a lot to do with the calmness that came to Minneapolis. So God bless you and thank you for listening to his voice and helping to bring calmness to Minneapolis. Yeah.
Rick, I got a phone call about a week later from a man named Eugene Rivers. He's the head of the Seymour Institute in Boston. African-American man, works in public policy, is kind of the lead voice for the Kojic Church and the Catholic Church. He wears a collar and works with all the cardinals in the U.S. and public policy in D.C. He got my phone number through George Wood Sr., called me up and said, President Hagan, I just wanted to find you. And I didn't know if he was going to rip on me, what was coming next, as it was pretty wild at that time. And he said, let me just give you my perspective. He said, the Black perspective. He says, there's a lot of us out here that care deeply about racial justice, but we also care deeply about the truth of Scripture. And he said some very powerful things. He said, had that funeral been in an all Black setting, he said, the animosity across the country, who knows where all of that energy would have had to go. He said, the fact that you hosted this and were willing to be on the platform as a white leader and to participate in it, he said, he felt, Rick, it took away killing. It took away people's lives were saved. He said it probably took away 50% of that vitriol that was in the atmosphere. It was interesting too, and I won't talk over this thing too long, is the whole scholarship thing happened in the first 5 minutes of the funeral that comes on. I did a greeting and talked about the scholarship, and there's this thunderous standing ovation that happens. It went on for about 45 to 50 seconds of this standing ovation. And within 5 minutes, the energy in the entire room became to the future. Let's think about this. That little scholarship was like this tiny little way out of this enclosed room that was about to suffocate everybody inside. We had thousands outside the building. There was 30,000 at the intersection down there watching, and of course millions around the world. But in Minneapolis, it just took the pressure off and gave everybody this feeling of good right at the very beginning of the funeral. And if you were in the room, it was palpable, the shift in the atmosphere when that scholarship was announced and how everybody rallied around, let's do something for the future for young people. And so it was a remarkable moment that the Lord, none of it was strategy. None of it was strategy. It was all just from the gut, and just the Lord helping us think in the moment the right thoughts.
The steps of a righteous man are ordered of the Lord. Scott, we haven't talked about this, but before we wrap up, we're big fans. Appreciate your book, appreciate your leadership, appreciate what you did for the city of Minneapolis and for our world here. Talk to us a little bit about North Central. We got people listening all over America to this thing. If they send their kids to Minneapolis, to North Central, what's going to happen to these kids when they show up on campus?
Well, they're going to graduate with momentum. I tell you this, it won't take them 4 years to recover from the 4 years they just spent in college. Our students are graduating. They're watering the earth. I could go on and on. It's as strong and as dynamic as it's ever been in its 91-year history. I live downtown here on Hennepin. The city is safe. It's beautiful. I go out every night in the North Loop. I walk the Stone Arch Bridge. I won't tonight. It's a little chilly out there, but the school is the upward trajectory, the momentum of the school. It's just fantastic. The school is, it's a comprehensive, but it's still an uncompromising Christian school. It is filled with students that are really pursuing. We take kids that are brand new in their faith, struggling in their faith, strong in their faith, no matter what that starting point is. I promise you that most of those kids, and I mean 99% of them, are going to, if they go through the process, they're going to graduate with some great strength. 60 degrees, different degree programs. They can go anywhere in the world. We got kids who go to Ivy League schools from here to do their master's program. We have a dynamic offering of online coursework degree programs now. You can take our master's programs in strategic leadership. We have a master's program in biblical theology that's very popular. I think we're in a truth-telling crisis right now, not just a leadership crisis. I tell people the big question is not what you've built, but are you still telling the truth in this day and age? And so our theology degree, our master's degree, but our strategic leadership degree in our master's program is fantastic. We have scores of people in that program now. And again, you can go online, on campus, residential. It's still the best place, 18 to 21-year-old. I don't think they're going to sit at home in their bedroom on an iPad and learn how to be a great leader. They need that human transaction of the proven life connecting with the promising life. And that's the power of NCU. It's still second to none as a residential campus. We had about a third of our graduates this year graduate with no student debt because the jobs are so dynamic downtown. It's still very affordable. Tremendous scholarship programming available to them. So we're one of the best low to no debt schools you're going to find to get a degree in the country. So it's got all the elements. It's one of the best kept secrets in the world that's now being told to the four corners of the country. So send your kids to Minneapolis. My wife and I will be a mom and dad to them. We promise you that.
That's great. Joe, you want to go back, don't you? You want to re-enroll, start all over.
Yeah. Looks like Jon wants to go too.
That was so inspirational. I was like, I want to go back to school now. My gosh.
Jon, we need to get you to Minneapolis, Jon, because all three of us have been deeply touched by this place. We need to get you in there as well.
Yeah. The entire time that Scott's talking about North Central, I'm reliving those years when I was there and walking from the campus downtown because it was close enough to do that. And in fact, there was one storm where it dumped 22 inches of snow overnight and it shut down everything. It shut down the University of Minnesota, shut down downtown. So we could walk downtown and have no traffic, right right down the center of the streets, in the middle of the night. It's just fabulous. And, spinning our cars around in the park across the street, against the law, of course, but I wasn't there. So I things I heard, right? But before our time's up, I wanted to circle back and make this observation, Scott, that in these transformational principles, the three threads that came out to me as I'm listening is, I'm here to help, do something good out of a bad situation so that you can face the future, right? And how can I serve? I mean, these are super simple ideas that can transform people, organizations, tribes, communities, the world. And you've given us a real life, real time example where it could have gone a whole nother direction. It could have been horrific. The history books have been changed because you were willing to help. You found a way to make good out of evil and give people something so they could face the future. I mean, it's just incredible that something so simple makes such a big difference. And to me, what that is, that's an indication that it's truth with a capital T. It's not just a truth; it is the truth.
No, thank you, Joe. And it is true. The power, again, I go back to that phrase of Elisha when he told the widow, "How can I help?" And if that would be our first instinct, instead of how can I lead, how can I speak, how can I help? And no matter what your title, no matter what your education, no matter what your talent, if we are driven by the desire to how can we help, and then what can I do to alleviate the suffering in this moment, and then let it all unfold from there. And don't have no grand strategy beyond that. I think we'll be amazed at what happens next.
Yeah, I've heard Tony Robbins talk about the tyranny of how, that oftentimes we get paralyzed because we don't know what all the steps are to get where our desired future is. And I love what you're saying, which I love this truth, is that you just take the next right step. How can I help? How can I alleviate suffering in this moment? And if those two are your guiding steps, you might not know all the steps from A to Z, but you know what a step from A to B is. And actually the step from B to C is the same as A to B, and from C to D is the same. How can I help? How can I alleviate suffering? And it's beautiful.
Great.
The steps of a righteous man are ordered of the Lord, not the miles, the steps. We're gonna wrap up, gentlemen. I want to bring you back to Sunday afternoon. It was one of my favorite afternoons. Phil Mickelson won the PGA Championship, and the oldest man ever to win a major. I want to talk to you about what happened on the fifth hole. He was in a gritty fight with Brooks Koepka, who was just one tough competitor. And Mickelson goes in a deep bunker on the fifth hole. It looks rather bleak. It looks like he might slide well behind Brooks. But as cool as a cucumber, he hits a silky smooth shot out of the bunker. Ball goes on the green, rolls into the cup. He gets a birdie, a two-shot lead. He never looks back. He wins, and it's one of the great moments in golf history. One of my favorite things is what happened between the time he left the fifth green and he got to the sixth tee box. There was a young boy there in a wheelchair, and Phil stopped and addressed the boy, and then reached in his pocket, pulled out the ball that he just hit in the cup, and he gave it to the young man and went on his way. And Phil is in the process of writing history, but he still had time to notice, and he still had time to be kind in that moment. So we've had a wonderful evening of talking about being in the moment and letting our heart be led in that moment to do the kind thing, the thing that would alleviate pain and suffering. That little guy in the wheelchair, I mean, he'll be talking about it the rest of his days. God bless Phil for that great act in that moment. My sister texted and she said, Phil has been my favorite for 30, 40 years. My sister has zero interest in athletics. She knows very little. She played nothing, but Phil captured her heart a long time ago. And one more time, I saw another reason why somebody like my sister, Andrea, is so in on Phil, taking time, still time to be kind, even while you're writing history. So may we all do that as we go forward.
Tremendous.
All right. Gentlemen, it's been an amazing hour. Thank you so much. God bless each and every one of you. And in an ideal world, we'll try to get the alumnus back to the school. We'll get J-Dub in there. Maybe we get you some kind of an honorary degree or something. But that would be fantastic. Thanks, friends.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
God bless you all.
Okay, thanks.